And good morning. It is Tuesday morning because today is the Kitchings Table Day. Welcome to our show. I'm your host, Earl Kitchings. Joining me, as always, is my co host, Ronleen Kennedy. Good morning, Ronleen.
Good morning, Earl.
Yes, as you might notice, Ronleen is always in a very joyful mood. So I'm always happy about that. So, Ronleen, I got a question for you.
I'm listening.
Have you ever misplaced your keys or misplace your eyeglasses or just misplace anything and can't remember where you maybe put them down or where you left them? Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah, perfect example.
Yep. There you go. Right on top of your head.
Right on
And
top of my head.
you're driving yourself crazy looking for that. And I think probably one of the most challenging things in this day and time is when you can't find your cell phone. Now, I'm going to say this. The one thing I do know about women, and this is not a sexist remark, it's just a fact, that when women put their cell phones in what they call the black hole, I call it the black hole, or their purses, it drops all the way to the bottom. And when it rings, it's always interesting to watch the digging process of trying to get to the phone, especially when the phone goes off in church. That becomes very, I think it's annoying, and it's also just kind of funny at the same time because it goes off and it's almost like it catches you by surprise, like, oh shoot, that's my phone. And then the digging process happens and you're looking for it and you finally catch up with it and turn it off. But there are times when we might just put that phone down someplace and we forget where we put it. I know I've put my phone on the top of my car, got in, and I drove somewhere, and ironically, the phone was still on the roof of the car. But you can imagine how devastating that would be to forget your cell phone, and then you lose it and you can't find it because so much of our information is on our phones. So I was asking you that question just to find out, what kind of experiences you've had with forgetting where you put things or forgetting where you left something or just forgetting, period.
Well, just like this morning, getting prepared for the show, I still have not found my book by Dr. Daniel Amen that I was going to use this morning. So I had to go resort to the online version to print off what I wanted to talk about with you today. Still haven't found the book. So now I said, well, what I was planning on doing later on today just has to be done early.
And that happens, and we get caught up trying to figure it out, and you'll spend, it's amazing how much time you spend looking for something when you really are needing it. Then when you don't need it, it's always right there in your face. It's like, I'm not looking for this, but here it is. You go to look for something else, and what you're not looking for is right there. Then when you're looking for that one thing that you didn't need, you can't find it.
You know what? I'm going to share this funny story with you since we had Sorella on our show last week. So Sorella gave me my key for the office that we once had, that we shared. And I put that key into my purse.
Mm-mm.
I know I put it in my purse.
Yep, the black hole.
Well, I found that key maybe
Mm.
about 4 weeks later.
Mm.
And it was only because I emptied out my purse. And I remember what my friend Jerry always told me. If you want to get rid of a lot of things, just empty out the whole room. So I applied that to my purse. As you say, it could become the black hole. Well, I kept hearing something in my purse jiggling as I was turning it upside down. And lo and behold, I had a hole in the lining of my purse.
Mm-hmm.
That key slipped into the lining. So
Found that hole.
I,
They found that hole and decided that's the hide.
yes. So anyway, I sent her a picture and said, "Thank you so much. I found my key." But this was weeks later. Of course, we had to go and purchase another key, right?
Of course. Of course. We always have to take one more step. And that's what we're going to talk about today on this episode of the Kitchings Table. And our topic today is a healthy memory. A healthy memory, because in a day and time where we see mental health affecting people in very negative ways, and I'm saying that from the standpoint of a lot of people who have mental health issues are doing violent things or having violent things done to them. We're not so much talking about that side of mental health, but we're just talking about that side of mental health where our memory starts to wane or starts to leave us, or we just lose being in touch with our memory altogether. And of course, when we talk about people losing their memory and losing that part of them that causes such anguish and frustration, it can be given the title of dementia. It can be given the title of Alzheimer's. But we're going to give a different name today for something that relates to memory loss. So we're going to talk about a healthy memory and the keys to a healthy memory, and give you some points and things that perhaps you can do, relatively simple things that you can do to maintain and keep a healthy memory. Because a healthy memory, and I have people who tell me that I can remember a lot of things from years and years and years ago. And I don't know if that's so much a healthy memory or just me being engaged with recalling, and that's something else we have to think about: recollection, recalling of things. But one of my pet peeves is names, remembering people's names. And there's an exercise for remembering a person's name, because I know we've all been in situations where we see someone, they call us by name, and of course, what happens? We can't call them back by name, and we're so embarrassed. That's the part that's funny, because it's like you're too embarrassed just to say, I forgot your name, because they truly believe you remember them like they remember you. And rather than just going ahead and taking that bitter pill of being embarrassed, you will try to find a different way to skirt that issue or get around it. And it is really funny to watch someone do that, because it's like, why don't you just ask them what their name is? And I've been guilty of that, but I also will say this, Ronleen, I will ask them. I will just say, hey, I forgot your name. And most times if you do that, people will tell you their names, because we all forget and don't remember everything, and not all names that we've known. But it's easier just to say, Ronleen, I forgot your name. What's your name again? Now, if you just saw this person yesterday and you do that, then you got a problem. But if you haven't seen them in a while, then it's one of those things where you just ask a simple question. The embarrassment gets worse. The longer you don't know their name, the more the embarrassment grows, because somebody might figure out and say, oh, you don't remember my name, do you? And now
Yeah.
you're even more embarrassed. You're like, well, now you don't remember. And some people, what will they do? They'll just let you dangle there. No, I'm not going to tell you. No, you ought to know my name. Well, and that's becomes quite funny. I've seen that happen. So I don't know about you, but how do you deal with not remembering someone's name?
I have a funny story about that. My mother and I, we were at a baseball game. She didn't know I was coming, and I didn't know that she would be there. So she was with the group. And we saw each other, and I came and sat with her in her group. And then this lady turned around and said, "Oh," she said, "look at y'all here at the game or whatever." And she just went to talking and talking, Earl, and she talked about just about everybody in our family.
Yep.
So my mother was talking to her or whatever. I engaged, in the conversation or whatever when it came down to me. And when it was all over with, I asked her, I said, well, Mom, I said, what's the lady's name? I said, how does she really know us? My mother said, I don't know. And I'm like, you've let her talk about our whole entire family
Hmm.
life history, and you
Right.
don't know who we're talking to, but she knows us quite well, in fact.
Quite well.
So I was like, from then on, I said I need to practice, just asking someone their name outright and just forget about, how I feel afterward or whatever. Just let them tell me, because she knew quite a bit about our family's history. I mean, from the time when I was young, when my mother was young, I mean, so it was like I should have known who she was, at least I thought. But and she even knew who my son was, so you knew that was bad, so
Mhm.
so she knows all of our generations, and we had no clue of who we were talking to.
Well, did you find out what her name was?
No, she
You
and she
still
wasn't
didn't find,
and she wasn't part of the group with my mom. She wasn't a part of that group.
and nobody asked the lady what her name was?
Neither one of us. I just
Oh,
assumed my
wow.
mother knew who she was. And so it talks about this. I
Oh,
found this in our AARP magazine. It says most people think of memory as a storage cabinet
that's
of
correct.
information, or where we retrieve, like we go to the filing cabinet and retrieve something, from out of the file or whatever. But it says we should set aside that notion. Memories exist to reinforce a person's life's narrative, something that you are on, and create a sense of identity and place in the world. So this is how come, when you study, you can go back and take a test and find out how much you've retained.
Okay.
And this is how you're able to, go through life events, simply because of your memory. Otherwise, it'll be just like in that moment we're talking and we have no idea of who we're talking to. No identification whatsoever.
They're not wearing the little sign around their neck like you put on your children when they get on the airplane. They don't have a name badge. They don't have a sign on their forehead. They don't have anything other than your memory to tell you who they are and help you remember why you remember them for whatever reason. Now, it's interesting that oftentimes something negative is a memory that we retain and can recall very quickly and vividly. Something negative, but something positive, not so much. And I'm glad you brought out the fact of how we store information and use the example of a file cabinet or file drawer, because in reading from this article that was written in the local newspaper by Robin Williams Adams, it indicates that the memory of a 20-year-old is nothing. If you look at it from a file drawer perspective, a 20-year-old memory drawer is nothing compared to an 80-year-old memory drawer. I mean, like you've heard people say, I've forgotten more information than you know, or I've forgotten more than you know. So when we talk about that, it brings us to the term that I wanted to share with everyone today, which is MCI. MCI, which is short for mild cognitive impairment. And the cognitive part of what you were describing is our memory that allows us to remember things. That's the cognitive part. And mild cognitive impairment is related to what they call cognitive decline. And cognitive decline is when you sort of tell on yourself about the memory loss or confusion getting worse over time, and you want to share that. If you don't want to share it with your loved ones, you definitely want to share it with a doctor. And when you have this worsening or the infrequency of memory or the memory is slowly, dripping out, is going away. These are noticeable symptoms for what could be early stages of Alzheimer or dementia. So this is something that we must be mindful of. And Ronaldine, you had me take a cognitive test last week for insurance purposes, and I found it quite interesting because in taking the test, you're asked questions and then you're asked to repeat what you heard and repeat as much of what you heard as you can. And for someone like myself who can remember some things from 60 years ago, 50 years ago, like it was yesterday or today, I didn't struggle a lot, but I did struggle with some things. But I kind of took pride in the fact that I was able to remember some of the words, not necessarily in the order, because they give you an order and they want you to say the words in the order. Man, you're trying to remember that order. And again, you need little keys to help remember some words. So if someone gives you the word of that you can relate to something else, for instance, if someone said computer, you might want to think about, laptop. You, instead of thinking about the word computer, think laptop, which means computer. So it's ways to do these things. But when your cognitive part of your mind starts to slowly deteriorate, then we have to find ways of recognizing that and trying to put in things to help prevent that. And there are some things that causes our minds or our memories to start to deteriorate. Stress is one, and stress does a lot of damage to a lot of people. I mean, people stress out over little things and definitely stress out over big things. Loneliness is a memory inducer, as I've titled this. Depression and anxiety. So those four things alone can have significant impact on our memory. And I believe stress and anxiety probably are the two primary things that will cause that memory to start to decline.
Mm. Yes, you're so on key with that because loneliness, that's the one thing that you just can't, help a person combat, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Days when they tell you that they're lonely, and when you're looking at them, you're looking at their interactions and things like that, how they communicate, and you just really have to get on their level and find what that level is. And then the most talkative people that I found that tells me that they're lonely, I'm looking at them, and they seem to have a lot of friends, around them or whatever, but it's something
Mm-hmm.
about that time when they are by themselves that you could tell when that time has crept in, because they don't engage, like that one-on-one kind of thing. It's like they're always distant some kind of way.
Right.
And
Right.
then you ask them, like, okay, well, I'm talking to you. Why are you distant or whatever? And they say, well, the topic is not, that. So it might be some kind of triggers or whatever that may happen.
Right.
So this is why, I'm so glad we're doing this for the month of May, because we're dedicating this time for mental health. The former President Obama, he was on CBS this morning, CBS Mornings with, he did a um, interview with one of the Nate Barrow,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
uh,
Burleson. Nate
Burrow,
Burleson.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about these massive shootings. I think he loves to read about different things. So this year alone, and this is just May, over 200 massive
Yep.
shootings has taken
Mm-hmm.
place, and he's created this foundation. My brother's keeper. To be able to launch that out. in multiple cities and states in order to engage people, men of color, to find other things to do, outlets or whatever, and to keep them engaged and to be that advocate to get out there about gun violence. And then he talked about um, the person, the I think it was the senator in Texas, how they missed the deadline for the getting the gun laws, changed.
Excuse
So
me.
God bless.
Hmm.
So we cannot. And then he said the United States is the only country that cannot get gun violence under control, but all the other countries, they don't have this massive shooting going on. So and their countries are larger than ours.
Well, I think one of the underlying reasons, or a few of the underlying reasons, maybe it's more than one, but number one, I think in the year 2023, the misinterpretation of the uh, constitutional Second Amendment is probably outdated from the standpoint of the way it's being interpreted in today's term. It was written 400 years ago. It applied 400 years ago to the way this country was at that time. The right to bear arms. Uh, the country was a wilderness back then, and they were going through a lot of changes. They were dealing with England coming back over to this country to try and reclaim the country. So there was a need maybe to have the right to bear arms. But in a day and time where the right to bear arms is a roadmap for devastating destruction of human life, you buy all these weapons of destruction. You have a country that manufactures uh, hundreds of thousands of millions of weapons and ammunition on a regular basis. There's no limit to how many weapons you can have. There's no limit on how much ammunition you can have. Uh, Now that you have people out here creating accessories to help a single shot weapon operate as a multi-shot weapon, and finally, you have a 3D printer that can manufacture a weapon that's undetectable by metal detectors. So we have this infatuation, I believe, with guns and weapons. Uh, I'm sure if we took a toll and count of how many violent TV shows we have on every week, all these police shows that are violent in nature, probably 60 to 70% of the time, it just it all relates to what's going on. So when you hear about 200 mass shootings in the first 6 months of a year, uh, statistics that have never ever happened before, and you compare them to other countries, well, like in England, uh, they have a very tight restriction on guns in that country, and even the policemen over there don't carry guns.
Mhm.
So if you're caught with a gun, you're in trouble automatically in England, because if the police are not carrying guns, unless they're called into a situation, but the policemen, or the bobbies as they're called in England, are just walking their normal routines, they don't carry a weapon. They carry a billy club or a stick or something, a baton, but they're not carrying a weapon. But you produce more weapons, means the more weapons are available. And just like law enforcement, those people who we call criminals, they're trying to get their hands on weapons, and so it's a give and take. It's a yin and yang. One spurs the other. So it's unfortunate, but for those individuals, Ron Lean, who are creating or doing these killings or murders because they have some mental health issues, that is where we're talking we need help, because those individuals don't know what they're doing, some of them, and law enforcement is not equipped to deal with them from that perspective.
You're so right about that. It's devastating, that's for sure. So many lives has been taken, and then President Obama, the former President Obama, went as far as giving statistics for 2021, where we had the largest devastation of people who died, as relate to guns, the violence with that.
Well, I think the saddest part of it is when children are the victims. And when you hear politicians talk about gun violence in one respect, but don't want to do something to curb this healthy appetite that individuals have for using weapons, the hypocrisy of it is just unbelievable. But when it touches the lives of children, from Sandy Hook to Uvalde, to what happened in Texas recently, when children are innocently part of a situation where they are caught in the middle of gun violence, you would think that would be enough for them to want to take action and put things in place. But when you have this fetish for guns, when you have this fetish for wanting to believe that your Second Amendment rights are being taken away from you simply because the people who you elect to office are trying to find ways to minimize gun violence, then it makes you wonder, what are they really trying to do? And what are they really interested in? And what's really going on?
Yes, that's so targeted right there, of what you're talking about, because my first massive shooting that I dealt with was when my son was in school dealing with Columbine. And I just happened to keep him out of school that day. We went and did something fun on that day. And in that, to on our way back home after having, a good time that day, um, we hear this on the news. And that was in that moment, he said to me, he said, well, something needs to be done about my school. And I asked him, what's going on at your school? And so he said, we have children walking around with trench coats on, um, black makeup, looking, gothic or whatever. He said, so at first, I was okay with it. He said, but I got to thinking about that, the things that you can hide under those coats. And we don't have metal detectors to know, what you're bringing in school or whatever. It's bad enough you're bringing knives to school and, all of the other things or whatever. But now you can hide a whole rifle in your trench coat. And so when he said that, that just became very disturbing for me. And I was thankful that, we were together when we found out what had happened at Columbine. And, I got a chance to just hear how his heart and my heart as well, went out for those families that were affected, those students who were cut down, before they can get their lives started to be able to live on their own. So, and with all of the, they talk about mental illness or whatever, but when I think about it, it's like, no, not everyone qualifies under mental illness. This is something that's ill will, and like you said, the infatuation of what a gun can do, or what a rifle can do. And for those states that fail to say, we need to raise that age from 18 to 21, I don't understand the thinking, and they're supposed to be the cognitive ones when it comes down to that.
Well, I would just say before we go to our break that when politics and major amounts of money come together, the politics goes out the door. It goes out the window because if you were truly concerned about the safety and well-being of our children from gun violence, uh, and and I'll just say this about the situation in Uvalde: when you've got hundreds of police officers afraid to go in and take out one person with a weapon, uh, that speaks to what we're dealing with. So when lawmakers who believe that the manufacturers of weaponry, the association that oversees rifles or guns, when these two entities play a part in the underlying fiscal efforts that our politicians are so well equipped to accept, but not well equipped to minimize, it's just hypocritical, and it hasn't reached their families strong enough in order for them to make a decision. And I don't even think they will make a decision or make a change, even if if it touched their family. They would come up with a reason and excuse because they're more concerned about the money power than the life power. So that's the way I see it.
Yes.
Well, we're at our break here on the Kitchings Table for this Tuesday morning, and we're happy that you're joining us. Uh, Join us every Tuesday morning here on WBIS LP 106.9 FM, or you can also check us on social media platforms such as YouTube, Facebook Live, Roku TV, and GPAC 23. But however you check us out because we're here to bring you information about what's going on in our world and maybe in your world each and every week as we find more and different things to discuss and talk about. Today, we're talking about memory loss. And Ronleen and I are having some conversation. So we're going to go back to talking about the memory loss. Ronleen, could you just share some additional points you have about that, please?
Yes. So let's talk about the different myths. It says myth. We use only 10% of our brain. Let me give you the fact. Evolutionarily, it would make no sense to carry around surplus brain tissue. And let's apply other logic here. If the 10% idea were true, it would make brain damage a lot less worrisome. Medical scans show that much of the brain is engaged during even the simplest task. An injury to the small sections of the brain called eloquent areas can have a profound consequence for language, movement, emotion, or sensory perception. So we are using more than 10% of our brain. I've heard that over and over again as I was coming up, and I'm so glad that I found this article in the AARP magazine. Another myth of older people are doomed to forget things. That's a myth. The facts are some cognitive skills do decline as you age, especially if you don't employ those strategies to pay closer attention and help you remember. But though you may have been quicker at picking things up, like learning things, because of what your brain is morphing, as they call that, every day, then you are memorizing more things. And it goes back to what you said earlier, Earl, compared to a 20-year-old, the more you learn, the more you're going to remember. So for a person who hasn't lived long enough, like a 20-year-old, they don't use much of, their brain hasn't um, been used long enough to be able to capture what the older person has captured.
Well, that analogy is just so thought provoking because, once again, when you think about how much information you retain in your memory each and every year, and where it gets filed in your brain and where it gets put away in your brain, and how you can recall it and bring it back, and how some things you can't recall and your recollection is a little foggy or a little hazy. And it's just amazing how the mind and the brain works, depending on situations and what issues you may have. So, of course, having a mental file drawer the size that a not even an 80-year-old, but a 60-year-old compared to a 20-year-old, that's 3 times as large. And it's almost like if you think about your computer and we talk about how much memory, and they put it in terms of numbers and letters. Well, you got 5 gigs, you got 32 bits, and all of these kind of things. Think about your brain and how much memory your brain can actually store, and how you can recall things. If I ask you, well, Ronline, what was the name of your third grade teacher? And you might not remember, although I remember the name of my third grade teacher. It's like, how can you remember some things that other people can't? That's another brain thing. I mean, I don't think I'm any more smarter than most people, but how I recall things may be different than how you recall things. Maybe uh, there's a switch in my brain that, maybe my collection file drawer collects and stores better, and my recall is better. Maybe my recall is just better. Maybe that's what it is. It's not so much that I have more memory than you. It's just recall, and that's another thing that is interesting to see happen. When we talk about, you were talking about a couple of weeks ago, you're getting ready for your class reunion. It's like, well, you told me you had about 400 people in your class, and I told you I had about 600 plus in my class. And if you had to remember people by name and or face, could you do it? And it's been amazing sometimes when I've seen some classmates that, just seeing them, I can call them by name, or if I can't call them by name, I can call them by face, and they're like shocked that I can just kind of do that. And I think it's so much fun when you call somebody by name. Even when somebody does me like that, it's like, okay, you have me at a disadvantage. I don't remember your name, and I think it's so funny when you do that to someone because they're looking like, yeah, I can't remember. Man, you look so familiar. Like, mm-hmm. And one of the tricks I like to do to people is, when I haven't seen someone in a while, is if I see them, and the first thing I'll say to them, "Do you have my money?" And the first thing they go like, "What money?" I say, "The money you owe me." They're like, "What money? What money do I owe you?" I say, "Oh, you forgot that you owe me some money." And they're like, "Man, that mind is just, it's spinning, it's spinning, it's spinning." It's like, "You forgot the money you owe me, man, and you told me you were gonna pay me back. I want my money. I don't
Yeah.
owe you any money." Okay, that's okay. That's all right, man. Okay, I see. And it's so funny because people will just try to recall, like, and I've had one or two people go like, "Do I owe Earl some money?"
Yes, I was thinking about when you were talking about the recall of your third grade teacher. And right now, I have a friend who's teaching the first year, third grade. And to listen to her dialogue with her students or whatever, I know her students are going to remember her for the rest of their lives.
Hmm.
I know that for a fact. Well, when I thought about my third grade teachers, I had more than one, simply because I changed schools in the middle of the school year. I think I changed that. I think that was the year I changed about 3 times.
Hmm.
So to come from one to another or whatever, I couldn't recall any of their names. Now my
Wow.
fourth grade teachers on up, I know their names.
You
We
remember them.
Yeah, I remember their names. You know,
Okay.
we had a rapport. But yes, the third grade, I was just trying to get through the year
Okay.
and
All
make
right.
sure I
Well,
didn't get held back. You know?
well, I'm sure something traumatic had happened to you in the third grade from your teacher. You would remember that teacher for the rest of your life. If that teacher had done something real traumatic to you, you would never ever forget that teacher. It's like, oh, I'll never forget that teacher. Oh, never, never. Well, what did
Yeah.
they do to you? Oh, they did this or that. Oh, I'll never forget them.
Well, you're right
That
about that. I don't remember my first grade teacher's name. Well, I think she was more like second grade, or maybe I had her for 2 years. I don't know. But yes, I don't remember her name, but I remember what she did to me. And it
hmm
reminded me of what Maya Angelou said. You know, a person may not ever remember what you said or did. They just remember how you made them feel. And I will
feel.
always remember how she made
Okay. All right.
them.
So there are some things that we have to be mindful of when we're talking about memory, and I would like to just point a few of these out. So you want to avoid being lonely by involving yourselves in some type of activities, social or otherwise. But involve yourself in activities. Proper nutrition. You need to eat what's healthy and good for you, especially those things that help with memory. You already indicated sleep is a good part of it, and I don't know about you, but I kind of live on 5 to 6 hours of sleep. That's about it. I can't go too much longer. I got to be really really tired to do more than 5 or 6 hours. Physical activities, no smoking, and you just always want to be mindful of your health issues. Let your body tell you what's wrong, and listen to your body. And if it's something that you need to see a doctor about, see a doctor. And that's why this article in the AARP newspaper was so important, because it talks about what things you need to be mindful of if you, as they say, ask the question, where are my keys?
Yes.
And sometimes it's just, you had too many things on your plate that day. You put it down, you didn't really remember because you had so many other things going. And they call that a blip. Um, if you got some unhealthy routines, you do things that cause you to be, in a bad place. You didn't get enough sleep. You're not sleeping well. You stayed up too late. Your daily routines go bad. Something else that could be unrelated, and they do talk about taking your meds and whether or not you are irritable or depressed. And then they talk about warning signs and listening or going to your doctor. And these are the things that will be of help to you. In talking about nutrition, Ronline, I want to just point out the first three things on this list. It was a list of 15 things. I'm going to just talk about the first three things, because normally the first three things or the first five things on the list are the most important. One thing was nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds. And nuts and seeds are also a way to, uh, help with your heart and some other aspects of your body. So, nuts such as walnuts, almonds, peanuts, and seeds such as sunflower and pumpkin are what they call brain foods and high in protein.
Yes. I didn't know how valuable pumpkin seeds were
Mm-hmm.
till I was having a craving one day, and my doctor was saying, because I was like, I'm so sick of eating these bananas or whatever. I was like, it's gotta be something better. I say, but I'm happy when I eat pumpkin seeds. I say, I just don't like having to. Yeah, I just don't like having to, what I have to go through in order to get, unshell the pumpkin seeds. And
Oh, okay.
he said, and then of course the salt. I don't like all of that
Mm-hmm.
salt either. So when he told me that I was on to something, and he asked me about walnuts and things like that, and then he told me the value of those, I was like, wow, so your body does tell you what you need. You mentioned that, listening to your body.
So one thing it says here is protein is the second largest matter in the brain. Protein, second only to water. Protein and water are two important things. So nuts, almonds, peanuts, sunflower, and pumpkin seeds. Next was fish, such as salmon. It's high in omega-3, which is a memory inducer that helps with your memory. And then the third thing were beans. Beans are rich in fiber, vitamin B, and again, what they call omega fatty acids. They also have proteins. So, if you did those things, and then when we talk about the one fruit for memory is blueberries,
Mm-hmm.
blueberries, and other dark berries. So I guess if you want to have blueberries, or for those of us who used to pick blackberries when they grew wild around your neighborhoods or communities. I mean, I don't know if you ever did it, man. But we used to have times when there were some undeveloped parts of our neighborhoods where they were like kind of wooded areas, and we would just find blackberries, and it was nothing like finding blackberries, man. You go find some blackberries, and man, if you find some big flat plump blackberries, man, you put them in
You're
that bag, and you know you try to pick all the blackberries before your friend does, so you'll have a bag. And nobody wanted to pick the red berries yet, but those blackberries, and then if you got a bag full of them, and you just use them as leverage to get something or to do something with a friend. And I'll just say this: my grandmother used to make the best blackberry cobbler,
uh
the best. And that's another story for a day when we might do desserts. But if you know anything about having a blackberry cobbler, I will rate it before apple, peach, or blueberry cobbler any day of the week.
Absolutely. I hear you. So, for Dr. Daniel Amen, I want to get through this real quick. If you can remember bright minds. So, the B stands for blood flow. That's important because it needs to take oxygen. It goes back to what you were talking about, the blackberries. It needs to be able to take oxygen to your heart as well as your brain. Um, R stands for retirement aging. Um, I stands for inflammation, and that's what's killing us is that inflammation in our bodies. We can combat that, and those foods that you talked about does help with that. Then you have the G for genetics. Then you have the H for head trauma. If you hit your head in any kind of way, please go get scanned and make sure that nothing is going on. You don't have any brain bleeds. T for toxins. M for mental health. I for immunity, infectious issues. N is for neural hormone deficiencies. D is for diabetes, and S is for sleep issues. So if you can work on that acronym to correct some things, in that exercise and meditation they talked about, that is so key in your life, because the exercises help eat up that stress that's happening in your body, help get rid of that inflammation in your body. So I'll take it away, Earl.
Well, you gave a long lettered acronym or a word. And of course, when we put our cognitive skills to what you gave us in bright minds, we're going to remember some of it. You're not going to remember all of it. And the ones that maybe stick to us the most, that's what we're going to remember. But when you did that, I was like, okay, so how many people are going to remember what all of that, all those meanings meant,
just
that word
just
bright mind?
yeah, just do exercise to get rid of, the burn up the toxins, and eat right.
There you go. It's just that simple. And as most physicians or medical people will tell you, and drink plenty of water.
Water to wash it all out. That's right. So you can sweat.
Yeah, that's what we got for you guys today on the Kitchings Table about a healthy memory, because retaining information, retaining things that we're doing, retaining how we do things, retaining where we put things, just retaining, day to day, what you're supposed to do makes a big difference. So we hope that our small journey today on this information process of memory has been good for you. Once again, we invite you to join us every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. here on WBIS Awesome Radio 106.9 FM. Here on Awesome Radio, you can find the Kitchings Table. My host, Ron Lee Kennedy, is always going to be in high spirits and give you all that joy and juicy information that she likes to bring to us. And I'm your host, Earl Kitchings, and we're always happy to be with you. And as always, for Ron Lee Kennedy, I'm Earl Kitchings, and we always want to tell you, go out and do something good for somebody else today. Ron Lee, take care. Talk to you next week.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you again.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.